Noting the hour, I am calling the Acton Select Board meeting to order. Oh, resuming an open session. And I just wanted to announce that anyone that is going to speak during resident concerns, if you could please state your name, your full name, and address, and also if you're from out of town, your town. You'll have 2 minutes to speak at the microphone tonight. Thank you. Resident comments? We have a timer that you can visually see that you have 2 minutes to speak.
On your mark, get set, go. Scott Smyers from 382 Central Street. A couple of weeks ago, there was a 3-car accident in front of my house. It's Central Street has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit right around there. The police, after years of complaining, put up one of those electric speed signs. You know, they shift it around town. They have to recharge it. It's very frustrating for me and my neighbors. This is the 3rd accident in about 3 years. One of them ended up with somebody dead right around the corner, not quite in the same space, but this is the debris that was left just on the street. You know, it doesn't really decompose by itself, but I thought I'd bring it in, the plastic debris that was from there. The speed sign, you know, it was missing for like 45 days before going up there. They used to charge it, have it back in a couple of days. Now, you know, we're in such short supply of money, even though we got this massive override. You figure you could buy some more of these speed signs. They're about $3,200 on Amazon. You know, what I'm gonna do if the speed sign doesn't stay up, and maybe I'll do it even if it does stay up, is I'm gonna stand out there next to the road with my cell phone, and I'm gonna point at the cars driving by, and I'm gonna get footage of the speed sign saying they're going 55 miles an hour. And then I'm gonna yell something at them maybe. But you know, I don't want this to happen. I don't wanna cause an accident by getting people's attention, right? Just get the speed sign and keep it up. Invest in a few more of them, please. We can all agree on safety. This is an important investment. The 3 cars that I complained to the police, they said, oh, don't worry, speed was not a factor in this accident, right? How do they know that? Nobody was there. They know that somebody was texting and driving and swerving into the wrong lane, and somebody else banged off of them and smashed off a stone wall and banged off another car, and the tow truck had to come and take them all away. They all ruined their days because of their lack of attention around a slightly curvy road. So please consider the speed signs as not even a major investment, it's a minor investment for the safety of our town. And then, you know,
Thank you.
they didn't do a good job cleaning up all the stuff, all right? I'll keep it with me. Thank you.
Online callers?
Hi, this is Nijan Datar, Winthrop Drive. I just want to make a comment on the upcoming, you're going to select a voter registrar, and I gather that the one who's retiring is leaning Republican, and it's my understanding that there are 3 people on the Republican side who are vying for that position, and I hope you select one of them, just for the sake of balance in the town. I mean, I think there are probably applicants from the Democratic side also, but they already have a registrar. So just for the sake of fairness and, you know, and trust in the upcoming election, I'd like the voter registrar to be selected from the 3 names on the Republican side. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another resident?
User? They should
Yep.
be able to speak.
Hi, yes, it's Tara up here on Mass Ave, and yes, I agree about the Republican thing. Just because there are so many Democrats in town, I think against anybody. I like the idea of having as much fairness as possible. I also want to agree with Scott about the signs. The speed signs have been very, very helpful around town, and I hope we get more of them. But I really signed on to say that I don't need to speak later on about the concept of meeting evaluation. But I really think that Fran is doing a wonderful job, and I hope that she's enjoying herself. And I love the idea that she's put the topic on the agenda to get feedback from the other select board members. And I hope they like the idea of a meeting evaluation. And I was always sad that not many people chimed in to help Jim understand what he could do better. So I just support the process, and thank you so much. I really have been enjoying the meetings lately. Thank you.
Thank you. What is that? So moving to our 7:10 first public hearing, a site plan special permit amendment. Oh, sorry. Oh, I have sorry, I completely overrode number 2. I have a quick chair update. I just wanted to say that thank you to Ice House Pond volunteers. On Saturday, a coordination between the Acton Conservation Division, ORS, and ORS. They cleaned around 17,000 water chestnuts from Ice House Pond. The objective was accomplished with about 20 different canoes, kayaks, and paddle boards, each loaded with laundry baskets overflowing with water chestnuts. I think there's going to be another clean out in the fall, and you can contact the Acton Conservation Division for that information. Also, the survey for Habitat for All will be open till the end of the summer. So if you haven't already, go to the town website and find the survey. It's a great way to engage in the planning of your town. And then I'll move to John with manager updates.
Sure, thank you. I would actually I'd like to take a moment, if the board would indulge, and address item number 8 that's on the agenda. We have our town clerk, Eva Skaratic, here with us tonight, and she has recently announced, or we're here announcing tonight, her retirement in September, and I just wanted to have her stand up if she would, and just be thanked. Eva's been our town clerk for 30 years, and she truly puts her heart and soul into this work, day in and day out, big election after big election, marriage certificate after marriage certificate. So it's a difficult job. She's done it for 30 years, and we all wish her well in her retirement. And she's got some work to do this summer, so she's going to be here till September. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to do that, so thank you for that. And Tom has an update.
Thank you, John. We're pretty excited to announce that the Acton Boxborough Youth Baseball Little League team has made it to the state finals, and they're going to be playing against Andover this week. I believe it's on Thursday at 7:30. They've posted some great information about the team and about the upcoming playoffs, so if you have an opportunity to check out the social media, we definitely invite you to. And fun fact is that they're 3 wins away from going to the Little League World Series. So pretty excited for them. We wish them good luck. And if anybody can make the trek up to Andover, it should be a pretty good game.
Thank you. Member minutes? Jim?
I've got one item. At a previous meeting, we reviewed the first round of the Department of Transportation's look at the Route 27, Route 2 intersection. The Select Board had comments and concerns about bicycle and pedestrian crossings, and that was I communicated with the Department of Transportation and the GPI, the contractors, and that was answered. There will be a clear north-south pedestrian and bicycle access on Route 27 as it crosses Route 2, and these routes will be seamlessly connected to the corridors created by the Kelly's Corner project. There was also a concern raised by the Transportation Advisory Committee about where the data was, where the traffic projections were and the traffic counts. They were concerned about that because they understand that some roundabout designs are not appropriate if there's vastly different traffic numbers coming from the entry points. So they wanted to understand how the state came to that conclusion that a roundabout was a good solution there. That was it.
Alyssa?
Thank you. Thanks, Fran, for mentioning the Habitat for All survey. I just wanted to remind everyone that every single household in town did receive this postcard, but if you have already recycled it, you can go to the town's website and find the link to the survey. I just wanted to let everybody know that on July 9th, the Habitat for All working group met, and we were told that a little less than 300 survey responses have come in, and that is compared with one of the most recent survey responses. I think it was for South Acton Village, that garnered 1,000 survey responses, and that focused on only one part of town. This zoning proposal, which would make cluster development the default by right option instead of a standard subdivision, would impact the entire town, all 20 square miles. And also inclusionary zoning is going to be a possible part of that. So it impacts the entire town, so we definitely need everybody in town to, as many people in town as possible to get survey responses, because that feedback is really helpful in designing the proposal. And I also wanted to announce that the Acton Water District has awarded contracts for the construction of the PFAS removal systems for both the South Acton and Central Acton plants, and they are planning to break ground next month in August.
Thank you. Dean?
Yes, just one, just to let folks know that the Acton 250 Committee is continuing with some planning for some more programming. And we're finalizing a really great program that's going to occur on October 1st at the Acton Memorial Library. It's a combined event between the Acton 250 Committee and the Memorial Library. This is very close to the date of Crown Resistance Day, so we're going to have the Acton Minutemen there. Some other events inside the library between about 6 and 8:30. And most importantly for some of us, we will be rolling out the Isaac Davis Brown Ale. They're going to start brewing it probably next week at Dirigible Brewing. So that'll be available for a tasting fee in the library. So I'll update folks as we get a little closer to the event.
Thank you. So moving on now to number 3, our first public hearing, the site plan special permit amendment for Lane Realty Trust, 531 Main Street. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on July 22nd, 2024 at 7:10 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually. actonmass.gov meeting/ BOS on the application of Lane Realty Trust for an amendment to a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 531 Main Street. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available online and at Acton Town Hall. How are you? Welcome.
My name is Werner Gossels, and Bonnie Gossels, my daughter. I'm the trustee of Lane Realty Trust, which owns the property at 531 Main Street. We call it Acton Technology Center.
Excuse me, sir, can you please speak into the microphone so we can hear you?
I'm sorry?
If you pull the microphone closer to you and speak into the mic,
Thank
there
you.
you go. Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Sorry about that. Bon, do you want to see if somebody wants to? That's a plan of the property and what we propose to do.
So if you can explain to us what you're planning on doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lane Realty Trust plans to create a new entrance and emergency exit at grade for the second floor of the building nearest to Post Office Square Road. The new door will simply replace existing windows. Fortunately, there is one place where the contour of the land at 531 Main Street and the site of the existing building facing Post Office Square Road make it possible to do this. The grade is the same, the road and the second floor of the building. We propose to take advantage of this by leveling the land from the roadway to the building, paving an access roadway to a new 6-foot wide entrance door and a 3-foot wide emergency exit door. The new impervious area will be approximately 2,200 square feet, providing a safe drop-off site for off-street drop-off site for people to be able to access. Wheelchair people will be able to access, also people that cannot do stairs. Right now, the only way to get to that second floor within the building is either by elevator or by stairs. And in an emergency, the elevator would not be usable because you can't use an elevator in an emergency when electricity is off. So this is an access kind of thing that's really necessary for that floor. And we're very fortunate that the grade works out in such a way that we can do it.
Madam Chair, can I project the plan for people?
Sure. Are you, Mr. Gossels, are you all through? Will you welcome some questions from the board? Yeah.
I suppose. We're not adding to the building an inch of space. Nothing is being added to the building.
Thank you.
The only purpose is the access.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Dean?
Thank you. Yeah, this particular site plan was signed over to me. I met with the planning department, reviewed all of the comments. The one question that I have is, the Post Office Square is not a public road. It's privately owned. I presume that you have an agreement from the folks that own the driveway that,
We do.
okay. That's excellent, thank you. For the benefit of the board, we do have comments from Building Department, Health Department, Fire Department, all positive. We do have a memo. I know this gentleman has met with the Design Review Board. They've had some questions. They've written an advisory memo, which I hope you can take a look at and see if you can implement some of their recommendations. They are strictly advisory. And, at the proper time, I will be happy to request a motion to approve.
Any other questions? Jim? David? David?
So just a quick question, maybe for us, we could do this after we close the hearing, is whether we want to condition this on some of the DRB recommendations. Maybe we want to go through those after the hearing or during the hearing.
Okay.
I just stopped sharing to go look at that again.
So if we're going to add conditions based on the Design Review Board comments, I would want to have that discussion while the hearing's still open so that we can get feedback from the applicants.
Sounds good. I'm scrambling to find that.
It's in the staff comment section of the,
Yeah.
yeah.
David, do you have those?
Yes.
Can I ask you to read them?
Yes. So the first one says the DRB agrees with the conceptual approach, that this was a conceptual design to start with. They said the drawing is not adequate enough to evaluate the design. A grading plan is necessary to show how the new drive will reflect the existing condition. For example, to ensure that water is not flowing towards the building or onto the street, and that the slopes on either side of the drive are not too steep. In addition, dimensions of the proposed circular drive are necessary to determine if there is adequate turning radii for the proposed van drop-off. It was noted that this could be very tight fit and may require more significant site modification. Do you want me to stop there, or do you want me to read all of them?
If you wouldn't mind reading, yeah,
You know, I
thanks.
didn't know whether we wanted to discuss them one at a time. Number 3 is, it was suggested that the pedestrian area between the driveway and the entrances be concrete rather than asphalt to provide a clarity between vehicular and pedestrian traffic since there's no curb. The proposed painted line will wear out quickly. The proponent stated that tactile warnings will be provided on the sidewalk on Post Office Square Road, and that crosswalks across the new drive will be painted, but this was not indicated on the plan. The DRB recommends this. And the awnings, finally, the last one is the awnings seem to be adequate and appropriate.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, so I think, I'm not sure what to do about the detailed design and the water. I assume that this is going to require a building permit and maybe may trigger some stormwater evaluation, I don't know, but if not, we might want to condition that here. I completely agree with that, since there's no curb, that the pedestrian area should be asphalt rather than concrete, and I think we should condition that. And I think we should condition that the tactile warnings will be provided on the sidewalk, as the DRB indicated.
What's that?
Thank you. Yes.
I'm not sure I heard what you were saying.
Well,
After the design review board meeting, we had the architect address pretty much all of the concerns. So that's why we submitted a revised drawing. It shows the turning radius. We addressed, there's now a swale for any water to stay on our property into the grassy area, which will be rock lined. We had the paving guy include in his work the tactile strips. Will paint the area where the sidewalk gets interrupted by the driveway, so there'll be the visual. We can't do the concrete because we want to have no lip where the thresholds are for these doors, so it doesn't catch on the edge of a walker or a wheelchair. So we have arranged with the paving guy to have essentially a very smooth transition between the metal threshold at the base of the door to fine grade paving so that they don't catch the edge of their assistance, whether it's a wheelchair or a walker or a cane, on the lip. So concrete, you have to make a form, and then there's always a little edge where it meets up against the paving. What we worked out is that the paving guy can come up with a smooth surface, which is much safer.
But we've incorporated almost every.
We addressed all their concerns as we revised the drawing, so that by the time we got to this hearing, their recommendations were included.
David?
So it doesn't matter then if we condition it, if you've already done it, it's done. We can still add the condition. You wouldn't have to do anything if it was already done. I completely understand about the smooth surface for people rolling through the doorway. But I think the DRB's concern is legitimate, that paint is maybe not a sufficient border between the roadway and the walkway. And so maybe other ideas need to be done there. Maybe it's not concrete, but maybe something else. I don't know.
Well, paint.
No, the DRB's concern was that paint was not adequate.
Well, the roads have paint to define. I mean, paint, also, if it wears out, you paint it again.
We repaint to maintain it.
Paint is what is used all over the country to
That's a
divide
safety
lanes
marker.
and all kinds of things.
Anyway, we
this is
would repaint it if it wears out or gets obscured.
And this is a very, very small amount of paving. We're not talking about a huge place. This is very, and the shape of, if you look at the shape of the drop-off zone, it's now flat instead of a circle that was here. You know, the previous drawing had a circle where it was not well-defined, but here, the area where the vans would park and people would exit the vans, it is a straight line. So that it's very unlikely that the vans that are coming onto the property to drop people off are going to drive toward the doors. They're going to follow the shape of the driveway.
I understand what you're saying, but still, the issue is potentially there, and you don't need to say any more, right? Because there isn't a curb to protect the walkway, and so anyway.
Dean?
We did add into the drawing the curb that they recommended where the railings are.
And we've added.
I'm just addressing Dean.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I very firmly and vehemently agree with the applicant in opposition to the comments made by Mr. Martin. You know, as you all know, I have a family member with severely compromised mobility issues. And the kind of small lip that they're talking about, making the transition from asphalt pavement to concrete, is exactly the kind of place where slip and falls occur. And since these folks, tenants, are going to be predominantly in that category, I could understand the issue that DRB has with painted lines if this was in the middle of a public street, but it's at the edge of a parking lot. And I think that the paving markings properly done and monitored from time to time, I think are adequate and frankly immensely preferable to having any kind of a tactile warning. Even some of these plates that you put down at the end of at a crosswalk, is good for folks that have a visual problem, but they can be a real problem with somebody that has chronic toe drop sort of problem. So I see the plans that have been modified. I would recommend that rather than go through a list of amendments and conditions, that we just accept the plans that have been submitted tonight. We can probably make sure that there's a new date put on them, and we should be done with it.
Do you have anything, Melissa?
The only thing that I had to add was that I appreciate the effort and the plans to improve accessibility. And I also appreciate the efforts that have been made to match, the new doorways with the existing windows. I think it looks nice, and I appreciate that thought went into that. So I agree with Dean that we should go ahead and approve it as revised. And I do also appreciate that you took the comments of the Design Review Board into careful consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. David?
So you might want to call for comments before we close the public hearing.
Comments from residents? We'll hear the online caller.
Colin, you used to be able to speak. Hi, this is Tara calling again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, I thank you also for paying attention to DRB. They're very hardworking volunteers and really smart. I agree with Dean, with the exception that if the applicant agrees to repaint, when it's not visible, there's no reason not to include that as a condition or on the plans or something like that. Thank you so much. And also I echo Alyssa's concern, gratitude relative to accessibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So do we have a motion?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
David?
So I'm fine if we want to stick with the paint, but now I'm wondering if we want to condition this to say that the paint will always be maintained to always be visible.
That sounds good. Yeah. Dean?
So I would propose a motion that the Select Board approve site plan special permit application number 6-6-2024-491 for 531 Main Street. In accordance with the staff comments and the updated plans submitted tonight. The site calculation date for the revisions is 18 July 2024. And that we accept the mandatory findings, 10.4.5 Board of Selectmen, in considering a site plan, shall ensure the use of the site consistent with the uses permitted in the district in which the site is located, and shall give due consideration to the reports received under Section 10.3.3. And we find that this plan is consistent with master plan, that this plan protects the neighborhood and the town against seriously detrimental or offensive uses on the site and against adverse effects on the natural environment. This plan provides for convenient and safe vehicular and pedestrian movement, and that the locations of driveway openings are convenient and safe in relation to vehicular and pedestrian traffic circulation, including emergency vehicles on or adjoining the site. The plan provides an adequate arrangement of parking and loading spaces in relation to the proposed uses of the premises. The plan provides adequate methods of disposal of refuse or other waste resulting from the uses permitted on the site. This plan will not derogate from the intent of this bylaw to limit the adverse effects of the use and development of land on the surface and groundwater resources of the town of Acton. If proposed use has obtained a special permit from the planning board under section 4.3 of this bylaw, the requirement of this section should be deemed to have been met. And lastly, this plan complies with all applicable requirements of this bylaw. I could get a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Are we going to discuss the motion?
Oh, let's discuss them.
I would like a condition in there that says the paint is kept in good repair.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
I accept that.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
And that's unanimous.
Thank-
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
very much, and we'd like to thank all the town boards that helped us with the submission, and especially the volunteers.
Thank you.
So moving on to number 4, 7:20, our second public hearing. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on July 22nd, 2024 at 7:20 PM in Acton Town Hall, room 204, 472 Main Street, and remotely by video conference and call-in on the application of NSTAR Electric Company, DBA as Eversource Energy, for relocating pole number 45/38 and install one pole number 45/38A easterly side, approximately 594 plus or minus feet south of Massachusetts Ave, to provide service to 2 Thomas Drive. From a computer, enter the link ID actonmass.gov meeting select board, or from a telephone, dial 646-876-9923 and enter in the webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request this to speak. Are we waiting for, is there someone from NSTAR here?
I suspect that the dial-in user might be, the call-in user might be from NSTAR.
Yeah, oh, sure, yeah.
Representing Eversource should be Chris Cosby, and I believe she might have a 508 area code number.
I think she just disappeared. Maybe she accidentally hung up.
So you just opened the hearing, right? Okay. Do you want to try this 978 number, see what happens?
Or we could ask them to dial, press *9 if you're from Eversource.
So the board could continue this hearing to a time certain, either later tonight, and maybe they'll come back, or
Okay.
to a time certain at your next meeting.
I move to continue the hearing until later in the meeting,
Time.
just in case.
You got to do a time.
I got to do a time?
Sorry.
9 o'clock. 9 PM.
Does that, Lisa?
Monday,
can we
July
do-
22nd.
Can we do that?
Let me send her an email just to find out where she is, because she did agree on the time and date, so she has all the information to call in.
Is there a way to just put this aside for a minute rather than continuing it?
Yeah, why don't we just put it aside?
I
And come
withdraw
back to it.
my
Or
motion.
leaving it, leaving it open and just conducting some other
That
business in
sounds
the
good.
meantime?
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay.
So number 5, under new special business, appoint new member to the Board of Registrars. And,
Whenever you want some information from your liaison to the Board of Registrars, I'm ready to speak.
and here you are.
Okay. So it's new for the Select Board to have a liaison to the Board of Registrars, but I'm really glad we do. I would summarize my findings as a board, we haven't been doing things the right way. And we can start doing them the right way, starting tonight. So this is an interesting one because I wrote 3 different versions of my, one after another, of what I was going to say, and finally straightened it out with meeting with town council today. So I'm going to go over my thinking about what we need to do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to at least go through the details so that people understand what's going on. We will have another chance to talk about the Board of Registrars this coming January or February, when there's another position coming due, as there should be every January or February, February or March coming up. But this one's particularly interesting. So as a reminder, the Board of Registrars, set up by state law, the relevant law, Title 8, Chapter 51, in particular Sections 15 and 20, are in the packet. So if people want to, try to struggle through the legal language, there they are. In summary, this is the only board or committee we have which refers to political parties. So normally we're very nonpartisan operation here. So the requirement under the law is, first of all, there's an elaborate definition of what a major political party is and what the 2 major political parties are. But in summary, it's what you expect at this point in time, Democrats and Republicans. The Board of Registrars has 4 people maximum on it. One of them is the clerk, and then there's 3 other members. Among those 4 people, there cannot be more than 2 people from the same party. Because our clerk, for the last 30 years, has been unenrolled, that in effect means that we either have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, or 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. as a matter of history, except for a brief moment earlier last year, we have had 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. One of the first job we have before we choose a member of the Board of Registrars is to be clear on which party we are choosing a member from. In some cases, we are forced by law to choose one party or the other, and in some cases, we have choice. The headline here is that in this case, we have a choice, and I'll go through that reasoning right now. The cases in which we don't have a choice are if it's a regular appointment, that is, let's see, let's get my months right, February or March, we appoint a regular member to the Board of Registrars whose term starts on April 1st. If there are already 2 Republicans, we of course can't appoint a 3rd one. And if there's already 2 Democrats, we can't appoint a 3rd one. In this case, what we have right now is we have Dina Ferrara as a Democrat whose term ends in 2025, and we have James Conboy, a Republican whose term ends in 2026. On the surface, it does appear as if we have a choice. And there is here's the thing where it gets complicated. So the 3rd slot had been filled by Tim Shea. He was appointed last year to fill out a term of a member who had resigned. So that term was running until April of 2024. But wait, Tim Shea was serving on the Board of Registrars in May because he was critical in the recount. So how does that happen? Well, every member of a Board of Registrars shall serve until the expiration of his term and until his successor has qualified. In other words, because we didn't appoint anybody else, Tim Shea was allowed or was continued to serve on the board past that time, but we still need to find a person to fill a complete term from now until 2027. And so this is this is an odd circumstance because it's not April 1st, but this is an example of how the select board, we haven't been keeping on top of things. So we should have on our calendar that in February or March, we will have an appointment. Every year, that'll be true. Those appointments are done by first, we verify which party is going to be represented there. In some cases, as I said, it's forced. In some cases, we have an option, so we need to have a discussion and a vote. And then we ask that party's town committee to nominate 3 people to potentially serve, and then we choose from those 3 people. That's the basics. In summary, we need to make 2 decisions. First, we need to have a discussion about which party should be represented next. When we get to that part, I have an opinion, and I'll happily express it then, but I think I should keep that separate from describing the facts here. And then, once we decide which party, we can look at the lists submitted by that party. And we would also be helped by the fact that we have a memo from the clerk's office suggesting which people on each list they think would be especially appropriate to serve. Are there any questions before I potentially make a motion about which party?
I have a question. So was Tim Shea's position like temporary since someone resigned, and was he appointed temporarily?
Yes, he was appointed to fill out the remaining term of a member who resigned, and that term expired on April 1st of 2024. But they continued to serve because the Select Board didn't act to
Right.
appoint somebody
Thanks.
else.
Thank you.
And
for
now we
clarifying.
have another regular 3-year appointment to
And just
fill
out
in.
of curiosity, not that it matters, what was his affiliation?
Well, that's interesting. He was actually listed by the clerk in the memo as unenrolled, which creates another interesting dilemma because we're supposed to have members who are Republicans or Democrats. I didn't go too deeply into that issue, but it does, it's another example of where if we were doing our job, we would have, looked at that and made a determination at that point in time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything? Dean?
Yeah, so Jim, I've got one question about the order in which we're going to do this. The town clerk has prepared a memo recommending 2 individuals. And so I guess my question is it a mandate that we determine first whether the seat goes to a Republican or a Democrat? Or do we look at the individual plus the party affiliation?
My understanding is that we need to decide which party, but we could certainly use the fact that we have lists of names as part of our, if we wanted to, we could use that as in helping us understand what the right way to go is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, I would happily make a motion then to get us started. I would move that our next appointment of a Board of Registrars be from the Republican Party.
Any other questions?
Is there, I guess we need
any
a second
discussion?
before we
I'll
discuss?
second that.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Yeah. So it's not automatic that it would be Republican, but 2 things persuade me. One is that I feel like I need more research into understanding why, in the last 20 years, we've always had 2 Republicans and 1 Democrats, except for that brief confusing period when we appointed Robert Ferrara to the Board of Registrars. We were briefly 2 and 1, and then we understood that we should not be appointing Robert Ferrara because he was a treasurer of the ADTC, which turns out to be explicit in the law that you can't do that. I think we probably do deserve to have a nice full discussion about, whether it should be, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican or vice versa, or whether we want to, change that from time to time. But I think this is not the particular time to do that because this particular appointment is so confusing. The appointment was, it happened, the opening happened because of a resignation, and reasonable people could look at, section 20 and say, oh, resignation, that means you always go from the same political party. Turns out in this case, we don't because they were serving beyond their regular term, but I think that's a subtle point. I'd rather take the time at a future meeting, at an appointment time when we have, can consider this with more, with more time and information.
Would you consider the expirations of when someone's serving? I know that if Dina Ferrara's term is up this year, logically, I would think putting someone from the Democratic Party makes sense, and maybe in March. But that's just me.
Well, here's what's coming up. Sorry, Okay. Here's what's coming up. In 2025, Dina Ferrara's position, her 3-year term will be up. At that point, if we appointed a Republican now, we would be required to appoint a Democrat in, January, February or March of 2025. The year after that, in 2026, when James Conboy term runs out, we would then have the option of appointing a Republican or a Democrat.
Any other thoughts? Alyssa?
Thank you, Jim, for explaining the many ways that we have not been conducting this business appropriately. I agree with your sentiment that this is not the time to break with tradition, so I'm comfortable with appointing a Republican member. I would like at some point to understand, so it says that the successors, as nearly as possible, be representing the two major political parties. We have had folks who are unenrolled. I wonder if it's possible to appoint a member of another political party, because this doesn't say only. So I just want, some town council to weigh in on that question. And also, in the meeting packet were personal statements from the names submitted by the Democratic Town Committee and none from the Republican Town Committee. And I would like, if names are going to be put forward, to have a statement, either in writing ahead of time to consider or during the appointment process. And if it's possible, to pull in someone who's unenrolled, in addition to the town clerk. It sounds like that's not possible, or another political party. I'd like that to be more broadly advertised, but it sounds like maybe only the town committees were notified that this appointment was coming up, and that's why they submitted the names. But that seems, what if there are Republicans and Democrats who are not affiliated with the committee, but they might like a chance to serve on the Board of Registrars? It would be nice to have a notification made at a select board meeting, on the town website, newsflash, et cetera, just so that the opportunity is more broadly advertised.
I think these are all questions worth researching. I will say that the language as it's written here does appear that we need to choose the members from a list that includes 3 enrolled members of such party. So in other words, unenrolled people, by this law, it appears to me, would not be eligible. But I'm not a lawyer. But we do have lawyers that work for us that can help us figure this out. And certainly, I'm sympathetic to that. You look around Acton, there may be more enrolled Democrats than enrolled Republicans, but there are more unenrolled than either group. So certainly if we're trying to be representative, it would be nice if there were a legal way of having unenrolled people, as possible members of the Board of Registrars. But I don't see how to do it with the way it's written right here.
David?
Yeah, a few things. So I think the law defines a party, right? So we can't do it another way. And I think it requires that or at least puts forward the way to get the nominations from the party's town committee. And I'm not aware of any other party having a town committee. And maybe Jim can tell us if there's another party that is satisfies the requirements of the law.
There isn't a registered town committee for either the Green Party or the Libertarian Party in Acton, as far as I'm aware, but that could change.
Right. If it changes that, that's completely fine. But it's not the case right now. I'm against choosing from the Republican Party this time for several reasons. One is, as you've said, we've had this tradition, if you will, of having 2 Republicans. It seems more fair to me to take turns here than it does to do that. Also, the next retirement is Democratic, and so that also seems more fair to me to name a Democrat now. It seems to me that in this process, we've done quite a bit of due diligence, right? Much more than we've done in the time that I've been on the board. So I really don't understand the argument that this is not the time, because you know, the work that you've done, Jim, and the work that maybe all of us have done here in reading the law over the past few weeks, I think we're better prepared now than we ever have been. So I don't quite see the fairness in that. So I would oppose that.
I just wanted to add quickly, too, that in speaking to the clerk's office, I think that there's been 2 Republicans and a Democrat for the past 20 years, so that's a long time.
I'm a little confused about the logic that if the next registrar whose term will expire in 2025, then that means that that person must be replaced with a Democrat, yes? Or she is reappointed. So I don't understand why it doesn't make sense, David, to appoint a Democrat now, because another another registrar's term will expire next February, March. So to me, it makes more sense to appoint a Republican now, because we're going to have to appoint or reappoint a Democrat in a few months, if that makes sense.
David?
So I don't think it's the case, Jim can correct me from his research, but from my research, that it's not necessarily the case that we have to replace a Democrat with a Democrat. We only have to do that if there are already 2 Republicans on the committee, right? And so what we're doing by naming a Republican now is locking in 2 Republicans for at least 2 years, right? And I think that's not fair. We were not in this take turns mode. I think it's, about time that we went the other way for a while. I'm happy going back and forth, but it seems to me it seems to be not an argument that we've always had 2 Republicans, therefore we must continue to have 2 Republicans. I don't see the logic in that.
I have to say I'm in agreement with David. Dean?
Well, I guess I'll have to say I'm in agreement with Alyssa.
Do we have any more comments? Should we hear from the public?
Why not?
State your name and street at the mic, please.
Is this going to be timed, Madam Chair?
Can we just say
Hi.
we'll keep it short?
I don't make long speeches, so which is fine. Hi, good evening, everyone. Sahana Purohit, 13 Blueberry Path, and I'm the chair of the Acton Democratic Committee. It's kind of interesting, heard the discussion. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, David. A lot of research into how you guys wanted to go with this. For me, I think, first of all, being the chair of the Democratic Committee, the logic doesn't seem to hold. You've had a tradition who created that tradition for the past 20 years to just appoint a Republican. And there's an opening now. All candidates need to be considered. And I think it's time to break the tradition. So I had kind of prepared a speech, but hearing this discussion just about deciding on the party, I feel it's time that you guys reconsider how you're thinking, because it cannot, something that's been out there cannot keep continuing to be out there. You need to think out of the box, think something different, and maybe it is time to consider the other party as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave Lunger, Wampanoag Drive. I'm the chair of the Acton Republican Town Committee. First, I want to offer best wishes to the retiring Eva Skaradek and for her future endeavors. Over the many years, it has been a pleasure working with you. Well, here tonight to consider who replaces the resignation of the Republican-nominated registrar from May 28th, it is worth considering some of the nature and recent history of the Acton Board of Registrars. To be fair, I'll note that I strive to abide by the Mass General Law statutes and over time correct observed wrongs made at one time or another by pretty much all of us involved. We should all strive to follow the intent and the letter of the Mass General Laws. While town government is generally nonpartisan, the 4-member Board of Registrars is purposely and by statute an exception to this rule. Each member, without regard to party, should be objective with respect to the law. That said, even fair and balanced representation of the two main parties with regard to elections is required by the Mass General Laws. The day after the May 29th resignation, and again on July 17th, the Acton Republican Town Committee submitted 3 excellent nominations, any one of whom would be well-suited to be selected by you and serve as a registrar and maintain the Board of Registrar Committee even-handedness our town deserves. All along, the Board of Registrars Committee has been well-balanced with 2 registrars nominated on the Republican side and the other 2 being a Democrat plus the town clerk. Thus, the makeup of the Board of Registrars Committee has remained equitable with regard to party enrollment and/or leaning in partisan elections. Picking from our list of 3 ensures a continued fairness and balance of the 2 main parties. To summarize, I'd like to restate the relevant MGLs. Mass General Law 51, subsection 20, states after resignation, the selection shall be of the same political party as the member whose position he is appointed to fill. Although unenrolled at that time, the resignee was Republican nominated and expected then to enroll as Republican. I might add that before him was Republican, Tom Beals, as far as I know. Mass General Law 51, subsection 18 states that in no case shall an appointment be so made as to cause a board to have more than 2 members, including the city or town clerk of the same political party. The Secretary of State Board of Registrars Guidebook reinforces these by stating the board must always contain no more than 2 members of each of those parties. With the soon-to-be upcoming September primary and November election, thank you for addressing this matter forthwith.
Thank you. Any other resident?
Janet Adachi, Simon Hapgood Lane. I am not registered as a Democrat or a Republican. I'm a registered voter and independent. And one of my suggestions is that you appoint an advisory committee hereafter to decide how to decide these things, because I would guess that a number of you are affiliated with one party or the other. But listening to the facts, it sounds to me as if the person who resigned was Republican nominated, and then it's logical to replace that person with a Republican nominated person, just to keep the balance. As Dave said, I am not partial. I'm just looking to sort of resolve what seems to be more complicated than maybe it has to be. But I tell you, if you're looking for an advisory committee of unenrolled voters, I am happy to help out.
Thank you, Janet.
Good evening, John Norton, Central Street. So as I understand right now, we have 2 Democrats and 1 Republican on the board? No? What's the makeup?
One Democrat, 1 Republican, and the town clerk who is unenrolled.
Okay. So we're not supposed to have 2 and 2, or we just have 3 in Acton?
Right, we can't have more than 2 of the same party.
Well, if it's going to be a Republican to make things square, I don't know what it is. We got 3 good names, myself, Scott Myers, and Linda Musto. So I think we should keep it fair and balanced, especially with the election coming up in November. Thank you.
Scott Myers, 382 Central Street. And I don't want you to get misled by Mr. Martin, who's implying that we've had this, the the registrars have been stacked with Republicans for all these years because we've had more, and that the town clerk is unenrolled. So obviously, you're implying that she must be also on the conservative side, so that it's been 2 Republicans and that unenrolled person and just this one lonely Democrat in Acton. I mean, come on. We know this town votes like 75% Democrat every time, right? The Democrats control almost everything. We need some balance at the registrars. A lot of us just want a simple motive with the registrars. Make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, right? And we need that balance in there. People could be unenrolled for lots of different reasons. There could have been a conservative person that votes Republican every time, but they don't want anybody knowing their business. They don't want to, every time they go, they vote, they go back to and register as unenrolled again as an independent, you know? And there's the other people on the other side that want to register as unenrolled for whatever reason, but they may vote Democrat every time, right? So that doesn't really tell you anything. So, but if the Republican Party in town has suggested somebody who happens to be unenrolled, then that's what you should trust from the Republican Party. If the Democrat Party in town proposes somebody who happens to be unenrolled but is part of the Democrat committee, I would trust them for deciding what's a good Democrat representative, right? But you know, that's disingenuous to say that the registrars have been slanted Republicans for all these years. You know, that's just not what's happening. Thank you.
Yes. If you can go to the mic and state your name and address.
John Norton again. Are you affiliated with either party? You don't have to tell me which one, but are you affiliated with either party? All you people on the board?
I'm affiliated with a party,
Okay.
yep.
Dave, are you affiliated with a party? No?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a
I'm
quick question
not.
for the town manager. So would you have to hire a town clerk that's a Democrat then? No, I'm being serious, actually.
Under what scenario?
If there are 2 Republicans and a Democrat, can,
That is not something that I typically consider in recruiting candidates for positions, so we certainly would
it's just
cross
the
that
makeup
bridge.
of,
We would cross that bridge if we had to and figure that out, depending on what the board does.
David?
Yeah, or said the other way, if the new clerk is a Republican, do we have to remove one of the members of
Right.
one of the Republican registrars?
Right.
Fran? Dave Lunger again. I wanted to say what David, you just said, is exactly correct. You can hire a town clerk, Democrat, Republican, unenrolled, Green Party, whatever. But then the registrars would have to be adjusted to suit that.
Thank you.
Kathy Lynch from Westford. Is it okay if I speak?
Yes.
Okay. So the process, I have a lot of experience in election integrity. The process isn't that you have to pick party first. I just want to make note for the law that that's not the case. Also, the intent of the law is to provide equal representation. I think we've spoken about that. And when you have an unenrolled person, you don't really know how they stand politically, because it's kind of like this chameleon, you know, you don't know which way they go. But if you look at their primary pick for the ballot, you can see if they pick a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. And the town clerk for the past 11 years has picked the Democrat ballot. So if you want equal representation, you would pick 2 Republicans, the unenrolled that leans left, and then the Democrat. And that's how you would get a fair, balanced board of registrars.
Thank you. Alyssa?
Thanks. I just want to say that I definitely don't want the town manager or the select board, well, especially the select board, since we're the appointing authority, to have any limitations on who is hired to replace Eva, right? And I think that Kathy made a really good point. I was actually going to share that I have friends who are enrolled in the Republican Party, just so they can vote in the Republican primary, but they're not truly Republican. And I guess I would be a chameleon because I'm not enrolled. So I don't have any issue with having 2 Republican registrars appointed for exactly what we are trying to achieve, which is balance. Because if you have someone who is unenrolled, then, you know, looking at the political leanings of this town and of this state, we're definitely leaning Democratic. So I think that that does bring balance. And I just wanted to make a correction. I can't remember if it was John or Dave who suggested that that Tom was replaced by Tim. It was actually, he was on the registrar before. Jim Conboy actually replaced Tom Beals when he resigned. Then Jim resigned and was replaced by Bob Ferrara, who then resigned and was replaced anew by Jim Conboy. So I just wanted to make that correction. And also emphasize, actually, this email that came to the board from Dave Lunger back in February to alert us to this issue. He mentioned it tonight, but I was going to mention that Chapter 51, Section 20 does direct that vacancies need to be replaced with the same political affiliation. So I'm, you know, even if Tim Shea was unenrolled, he was a nominee from the Republican Town Committee, and I think it's really important to replace him with a Republican registrar member. And somebody mentioned the election coming up, and I think that it's really critical that we have this balance and we have trust from all voters given the outcomes of Acton elections historically.
David?
So I don't understand how 2-to-1 is balanced. Maybe that's just me, right? The person who's unenrolled, our clerk, when someone chooses what primary to vote in, that is just a strategic decision, right? I used to be unenrolled and I used to choose different parties. In Massachusetts, it's often more interesting to vote in the Democratic primary because there's more candidates in the Democratic primary. It doesn't necessarily indicate that someone is left-leaning or right-leaning, and I think it's unfair to that person who has declared themselves to be unenrolled to say that they're left-leaning or right-leaning. So that person has declared themselves as unenrolled. The other 2 persons, the law requires that we take them from a party. The same thing with the person that we're replacing is unenrolled. I don't think we can assume that that person wanted to be a Republican when they are, in fact, unenrolled. And from what all of you are saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that if we choose a Republican here, we have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat forever, right? Because you're saying that we always replace the person with the same party. That wasn't my understanding, but that's what both Jim and Alyssa seem to be saying.
Can I just clarify? My understanding is that if it's someone who has resigned and you need to appoint someone that's temporary, they have to be the same party affiliation, right?
Yeah, I have the same interpretation of the law, that if it's a regular term appointment, then it can be either party as long as you're not creating a situation with more than 2 from the same party.
Okay, that was my understanding as well, right? So, okay, we're all set on that. So if we choose a Republican today, which is fine, right? We're locking it in for 2 years, right? Because which I think is again not wrong. I'm not. Mr. Smyer said I was saying it was stacked. That certainly is not the case. I did not use that word. I did not imply that in any way. I just said that in terms of fairness, it makes sense to me to go back and forth. It doesn't make sense to me that, say, fair is 2-to-1, right? Fair and balanced is not 2-to-1, right? And so I don't understand that logic, that's all.
Jim?
So to summarize, I hear a lot of sympathy from the board about the notion of moving toward a system in which we alternate that 2-to-1, the 1-to-2, and taking control of the process more by following the law. will allow us to do that, because we'll know, when the appointments are and who's serving, and we can have that discussion. Now, of course, that's this board, 25, 26, 27, there'll be a different board, a different decision might be made. But I'm very comfortable with that general direction. The reason I end up not wanting to make that change this particular time is twofold. One is that this particular situation is so confusing with the resignation happening, which would make a reasonable person think that then that had to be replaced with a person of the same party. But then you talk to the lawyer, and the lawyer says, no, they already finished their term. They were just serving because we haven't replaced anybody else. And so this is a regular term appointment. I mean, I get that after talking with Nina, but it's complex. So I thought it might be simpler to just go with the Republican this time. The other thing I thought that this whole question of what kind of balance we want in the long run deserved a longer conversation, maybe at a time when we weren't actually facing a particular appointment that has a time urgency, because we have elections coming up, and it'd be good to get somebody on board, so they can get trained and be ready.
Did you say that out loud? Oh, to me? Oh. Call in online resident. Hello?
Yes, it's Tara again. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
The idea of fairness sometimes isn't about doing it exactly as the existing parties, the same percentage, but rather to represent or balance the conflict between majority and non-majority, so minorities. So in the case of Acton, the Republicans are in such a minority, and if you look at the party affiliations of people that are serving in very powerful committees, it's very largely Democrat. And so to me, it's a nice gesture to say, hey, the registrars, all they're going to do is look at votes. And, I think, it's a nice gesture, but also that you can go and look at an election and say that's a clean election because you had more Republicans than Democrats, and of course, the Democrat looking at the ballots can raise their voice if they see something inappropriate. But I think it's a nice gesture. Also, where the town has been sort of in violation for so long, I feel like it's a safer call to elect a Republican, at least this time. So thank you very much. Considering this, I love the idea that Jim had to have a longer conversation when you're not faced with an actual task. Thank you.
Okay. Or any more conversation? I would love a motion.
I think there may be a motion already.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
we did, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was seconded.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because that was so long ago, I can recall that the motion was that this next appointment be a Republican.
Any other discussion? Olin? There was a second.
There was a
Yeah.
second a few minutes ago. I was just repeating the motion from the past.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Nay.
So just to say it out loud, that sounds 3-2?
Sorry. 3 ayes and 2 nays. The motion passes.
Now we have part 2, where we get to pick a person. I would also happily jumpstart this discussion by noting that the town clerk noted that John Norton has had a lot of community involvement and would be an excellent choice for the role. So I would nominate John Norton to be on the Board of Registrars for a term to end at the end of March 2027.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That was unanimous.
It's unanimous, yep. Moving on to number 6, approve request for additional financial commitment from Acton Community Housing Corporation for $150,000 towards Acton Housing Authority's McManus Manor project.
So the Acton Community Housing Corporation recently, in my understanding, voted to approve additional funding to go towards the McManus Manor project as required for expenditures from the ACHE. It also requires approval of this board for that funding to be used, and that's what's before you tonight. I notice a leading member of the ACHE in the crowd if there are any questions on that topic.
Janet? If there's questions, yeah. Are there any questions?
I'm hoping there aren't any, but.
No, sorry. Sorry to summon you to. Are we ready to vote? Make a motion?
Oh, I'd happily move to approve this expenditure that the ACHC wants to make.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
I'm just wondering whether that, the motion should contain the amount rather than, Madam Chair, can we remake a motion just to make sure that we're clear? Yes. I move that the board approve the ACHC's spending $150,000 towards the McManus project from the ACHC's
CPC account.
the ACHC, what account?
It's in its
Just
account for
just
CPC.
the ACHC's account.
Oh, that seems to be exactly what I meant to say. Thank you.
All in favor?
So,
Second.
Okay.
did we, I think you need to amend it instead of making a motion anew.
I'd like to amend my motion. I'd like to amend my motion to say what David just said.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Actually, though, can we stop here procedurally? That other motion was passed and done. We need to make a new motion. And the new motion can say that it supersedes the old motion. So now we have to,
I think we're okay.
yeah, maybe we're okay.
Yeah. I think everybody knows what's intended. Don't spend that money twice, Janet, wherever you are.
I'm just a little concerned about where
What,
a
Lisa?
motion has money.
So nobody seconded your motion, so maybe Jim should second it.
Should I try again?
Sure.
I move that the Select Board approve the ACHC's request to spend $150,000 towards the Housing Authority's McManus Manor project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So number 7, approve use special permit conditions for Let's Roll LLC, 930 Main Street. So, David?
So I was just going to say, Madam Chair, that at least in my reading of it, it looks to be what we discussed
Yes.
last time, and I could move to approve if you would so desire.
That sounds great. Yes.
So before we vote on that, I would note a small typo in section 313, add an E to the word lapse. Very minor, but Jim talked about people running laps outside. So.
I move to approve the special permit for Let's Roll LLC, 930 Main Street, as edited.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Unanimous.
I think the manager did 8 initially, so we can go right to 9.
Approve town clerk recruitment and appointment process.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, Eva Skaratic is retiring in September, and it is, the town clerk is a select board appointment. And just as we did with the town accountant, which was a select board appointment that the board made last year, the town staff and administration did the recruitment and then brought forward a candidate for the board to either approve or not. Thankfully, you approved the town accountant. And so I propose to follow a similar process here, and I propose to start it immediately. And the reason that I wanted to just have this process briefly laid out in the packet, in the memo that I sent to you today, is just to make sure that the board's comfortable with it, because in order to do it quickly, I want to make sure that you're all on board with it before we jump in. As described in the memo, our plan would be to finalize the job description, which we have done. We met with Eva over the last few weeks and talked about, what her job description said for the last 20 years, and if there's anything that it should probably say in the future, and we've made those adjustments. So what we would do is work with HR to get that job posting out, hopefully by the end of the week, and we'd put it on the website, we'd put it on social media, we'd put it on the Mass Municipal Association page, we'd connect with the Town Clerks Association, which is a pretty active group, and I think that would be a pretty good place to send the ads, and then we'd try to get candidates in and screened. We like to, if we get a large group of candidates, we like to do a screening interview, which is usually brief, and then we'd like to do that by the end of August, and have more in-depth in-person interviews before Labor Day, or whatever, if before September 6th, and then have an appointment for you to consider your first meeting in September, which would be the 8th. What I would propose is to invite a member of the board to sit in on the second round of interviews, which would probably be the first week of September. And yeah, I look forward to any feedback or concerns you have about this process, and if there aren't any or isn't any, I look forward to you approving it as outlined.
Jim?
Just one question, John. Could you sort of go over the thinking behind having the position report to the Director of Finance and Administration? Like, were there any pros and cons or other options?
Yes. So currently, the town clerk works downstairs, as you know, in what we call the finance wing. and most of the other operations there are underneath the Director of Administration and Finance. And Mary Ann, who serves in that role, is a strong leader and provides good support to departments that work for her. And so I thought it was a good fit for that to continue. The other option would be to have them report to me, which, you know, having them report to the Director of Administration and Finance is almost the same thing as reporting to me. It just makes that person do the extra work of the supervision. But it's a team effort. So, I mean, technically, it reports to the Select Board, and I report to you and the whole chain. So I think functional supervision is best suited down in Administration and Finance just because of physical proximity and also a lot of work that they share at the counters from an administrative standpoint. But I'm certainly open to suggestions if you'd like to see it done a different way. We like change, so we're okay with change.
No, I'm okay with that. I was just curious to understand it. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. I think in the past, we were in a situation where you had, maybe still, I don't know, but for a while you had so many reports that it seemed like it's been really good to have these new, directors like Mary Ann who can, take some of that load. So it makes sense to me. I just want to make sure we had understood it together.
Alyssa?
I think that the process makes sense and the job description looks good. I would just suggest under the job duties that number 17, we change Board of Selectmen to Select Board.
Any other questions? I think it looks great. Alyssa?
John, did you have anyone in mind for a board member who would sit in on the interviews, or is that a decision that you'd like to leave to the board?
I was thinking the chair or the vice chair if the chair wasn't available.
And were you thinking one or two?
I was thinking one or two. I think two would probably be okay. We like to have a good team we usually use this room for an interview like that where we'd have some department heads, and it would be great to have two board members there as well. So in that case, I would again default to the chair and the vice chair.
Great.
For who I'd invite.
Cool. We don't have to make that decision now.
I'd rather you didn't, because then it creates a public body.
Yeah. Dee?
Would you like a vote to approve this process, or do you think you've got enough guidance?
Yes, please.
I would move that the Select Board approve the recruitment and appointment process outlined in the town manager's memo for town clerk.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
So moving on to 10, authorize town manager to sign Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project permission slip for water management work on town-owned property at 325 Arlington Street behind.
So this is a notification that the mosquito control folks send out to property owners where they are doing work on their property as part of their mission of mosquito mitigation. And so this is not a request for a permit or a license to do this work. It's a request to the town as a property owner to do the work that they're charged with doing, which they have to get the appropriate permissions to do that, which I'm not exactly clear of what those permissions are, but I don't believe they're through the select board. I think it would fit, if it's DEP or somebody else, they would have to do it that way. I did check with conservation, and I didn't have a chance to fully connect with them on that, but I think the way I just described it is the way that it would go. So if the board is concerned about that, it could consider authorizing me to sign it as long as conservation is okay with it.
Any questions?
Yeah, no questions or comment. In point of fact, that area has been cleaned out in the past, in my memory. It's pretty much a landlocked piece of property out and back there. The work, I'm familiar with the kind of work that they do. It's all just using hand tools. It's just removing organic matter, getting down to mineral soil in the drainage ditch. And I believe that work is actually exempt under the Wetlands Protection Law Act. But in any case, they do it throughout town, on private property as well, with private property owner's permission. So it's pretty much routine, and it's, from an environmental point of view, they're not using any biologicals, they're not using any chemicals. They're just helping the flow of water.
David?
Yeah, I am in favor of this, and I don't think we need the extra statement that says if the Conservation Commission approves, if it needs to be permitted by the Conservation Commission, they'll have to get the permit, but I don't think that this letter, we need to
Include that, yeah.
include that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Jim?
This reminds me that I'd love to have a future agenda item to talk more deeply about our involvement with the CMMCP. And their spraying protocols, their permission process. It seems like they should be notifying us in a way that I don't think we've been notified. I know we can go on their website and look, but it looks like their law says they actually have to tell us, the select board. So I wouldn't mind reviewing that. I'm not sure it's, I have a lot of questions about it. So for another time. And I did have that concern about it. It does seem like, mucking around in a wetlands, then, changing the water level changes the ability of that swampy area to support some kinds of life and favors others. And it sure seems like it should have an environmental review of some sort. But I think that can be pursued informally by just, as the manager did, asking our super new conservation agent to look into it and find out. I think that's plenty.
David?
I move to authorize the town manager to sign the Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project permission slip for water management work on town-owned property at 325 Arlington Street. Behind 325 Arlington Street.
Second.
All in favor? Oh. Online comment?
Yes, thank you. It's Tara again. So thank you for calling on me. I believe that you're right about the exception relative to mosquito control from the Conservation Commission process. But I weighed in right now because I want to make sure that people know that this is specific to the town-owned property. But I did not see the language that Dean said, that it's only mechanical measures. And I hope that if there are any chemicals, that we take a closer look at that and have a specific hearing relative to chemicals, because people work so hard to keep their gardens organic, and that I don't think we want to undermine that by approving large-scale spraying. I noticed that Boxborough had approved what do you call it, helicopter spraying, And so I want to know, where is it written that it's mechanical only, because I would like to see that. Thank you.
Yeah. I would direct you to the meeting packet, the information in our meeting packet.
Thank you. I looked there and I didn't see it, but it it's because the license doesn't work right now, so I can't tell. But I'll trust that your motion includes only mechanical measures, and I would be totally in favor of that. Thank you so much.
I got caught up on the license as well. It's working now. Keep trying. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Number 11, review status of current capital projects.
So thank you. At a recent meeting, there was a few questions about some things happening around town. It's pretty busy in the community right now. Kelly's Corner is an ongoing project, but there are several other things happening throughout the town. And Tom and I are both going to go through a few things that are happening and give an opportunity for the board to ask any questions about the projects. And we can plan to do this regularly. Before we go to the slides, the monument across the street, the Isaac Davis Monument, we are out to bid right now to do some preservation work on the structure with CPA funding and grant funding, part of work that we're doing to prepare for the 250th, making sure that's looking really good for that those events. So to get to the other projects, sidewalk construction is happening throughout town, Taylor, and then we're working towards Willow and Parker. The High Street bidding has been complete. Main Street corridor, we have different things happening. From Route 2 to the center, we're preparing for paving. The Main Street and Prospect Street intersection, the funding was approved for that at town meeting, so we're now working on the permitting and hope to have that ready for next construction season. Piper Road sidewalk study, we're going to work on that this summer. Powder Mill Road infrastructure for the new apartments, that's starting soon. I don't know if you've seen, but they started some of the demolition work on the actual site for where the apartments will go. And so the work that'll happen on the road is going to start happening this fall, which includes a sewer extension and other things that are needed for the utilities to support that project. The parking lot behind this building, it's continuing to deteriorate. We do have funding for design to improve that, and so that's underway as well. And the what not mentioned here is the West Acton Village Complete Street Study. That was just sort of completed, and now we're working on implementation. We have been in touch with the Transportation Advisory Committee on some components of that study that may need to be accelerated due to concerns near the school, near the new school, near the new Boardwalk campus. So more to come on that, and we can have Corey come here and he can go on for an hour about all the different things. This is just a quick hit list. Next, we have further, I mentioned we're doing a design of the parking lot. That had been on hold until we finalized the site plan for 17 Woodbury Lane. And now that we've gone through Historic District Commission for initial support and the Conservation Commission for, I believe, complete support for what we're proposing to do here, we have a design. We've done a cost estimate. It came in, we were trying to keep this whole thing under $1 million because that's just about what we have available. It's currently at 1.2. So we're going to work on ways to figure that out as we go out to bid this fall. But the project is going to be, it's going to be a really good addition to the municipal complex here. It'll be a space that can be used by library users, by town hall users, by members of the community that just want a place to have a small meeting indoors or outdoors. And it's going to be a really nice way to reuse that site. We have federal funding. We have $750,000 earmark from Congresswoman Lori Trahan and several other funding sources, including CPA funds, that are going to help us get that project done. Next, we have Gardner Field. This is not easy to read. It's very faint, but all those lines are pointing to changes that we've made to the site. We have a modified site plan that has been approved by the Historic District Commission, and it basically changes the wall. And if you go to the next slide, Tom, the wall that had been put up there to get the playground installed didn't meet standards that the Historic District Commission thought were appropriate, and so we've redesigned it in a way that meets those standards, and also it works better anyways, and I think it'll be a good change. It's just going to create a little bit more disruption. Fortunately, the playground itself has remained in service the entire time, but it will look like a construction site for a while. But hopefully people can bear with us. We've ordered a lot of the site furnishings that are going to help that place feel more comfortable. We've ordered the granite pillars that are going to be part of the decorative front entrance, and the metal archway is being modified with a metal fabricator to fit with what they need to be fit with. The retaining wall modifications have started in July, and I haven't been out there in a week or so, so I'm not sure where they're at right now, but it's moving along. The site plantings they've been to the nurseries. They're not going to plant them in the dead of summer, but they will be planting some of those plantings as we get closer to the fall. And the stone wall that's part of the plan that will go along. If you see here, there'll be a stone wall near the sidewalk that's parallel with Mass Ave. That will be, hopefully, we can start on that this winter. So, as I said, it's an awesome playground. The kids and the families are using it every day, but it is going to remain kind of having that construction site feel for a while. So please bear with us. Next, we have Main Street sewer extension. We did secure all the funding needed to do the sewer extension project. We had a kickoff meeting recently, and they're starting to mobilize before the end of the summer, hopefully. And it'll be under construction through 2025. So that's the same schedule as Kelly's Corner, so through the end of 2025. The dog park, which is sort of next to the sewer extension, that is at 90%. We had been waiting for all these things to get finalized before they could finish the design, so we're at that point now. And so that we're just finalizing bid documents, and we'll be out to bid, I don't know, probably not before, in the fall. And then McManus Manor, we just heard from ACHE that they've, and the board has provided another $150,000. And so I think they're still working on some of the larger finance pieces, and their intent is to break ground within the next 6 months, early next year. So that's what's going on Main Street. Then shifting over to DPW facility.
DPW facility project, the committee has been established, which consists of a number of different individuals, including Dean and myself. We are pretty excited that we've entered into a contract with for an OPM and a designer. The owner's project manager has been selected as PMA, who have been fantastic in guiding us through the process. We recently onboarded Wesson and Sampson as the designer, and they hit the ground running with the intent of having a final conceptual cost estimate for us by November. They began immediately working with DPW and different stakeholders internally to start identifying what that design would look like and really what the needs are of the facility currently and where it's going into the future. So we do anticipate this moving fairly quickly, so we'll be in a good position by November. And then we're off to the races. Continuing the DPW facility, the fueling station replacement, what you see in front of you is the preferred design. Really quickly, I don't know if you can make it out too much, but on the top part, you'll see a green pickup truck and a red ladder truck. That'll be the town side. That has one 10,000-gallon split tank between gas and diesel. Below, you'll see a passenger van and school bus. That'll be shared by Case and ABR School District. That has a 10,000-gallon gas tank and a 5,000-gallon diesel tank. And the intent of this is to have one-way traffic in, looking into pumps potentially that would be able to reach from one side to the other, so you don't have two buses or a bus and a van facing each other. You just have continuous flow through one direction. So that's currently being worked through, and bid documents are on their way as well. 53 River Street, the favorite project that just continues. We are currently in a soil remediation phase. So when the contractor began removing the facilities and the foundations of some of the buildings, and then tested the soil, there was asbestos-containing material found in a large portion, and it was found for about 900 tons. That was since removed and remediated. That was funded primarily through an additional appropriation from the Dam and Seawall Grant from the state. They awarded us an additional $150,000 late in FY24 that allowed us to complete that. Once that was removed, additional testing of the soil underneath that material came back positive for some other material, and now we're working towards remediating and disposing that soil. That's about 150 plus tons. We've identified that we're probably going to need additional funding, and we'll be coming in front of the board at a later date. On the bright side, we do currently have $225,000 that's dedicated solely for construction. That consists of $200,000 from a CPC appropriation for FY25 and a generous earmark from Representative Cena in the FY25 budget. So that has given us a pretty good start on construction. The numbers that we've received are a little old, so once we have this new issue remediated with the soil, we'll move towards construction and start identifying what that dollar amount looks like. We have been looking at different grants. We've missed a couple deadlines of some of the grants. By the time we started talking about them, they've unfortunately passed for deadlines, so we are keeping our eyes open to see if there's any additional funding possibilities out there. And I believe that's it. Yes, that's it.
Thank you. David.
So I think on slide 2, you said for sidewalks, you said bidding complete for High Street. Bidding for High Street for what?
I'm going to have to double check what that means, because that confused me when I said it.
Because High Street has a continuous sidewalk.
Yeah.
Unless there's some repair or something, which I'm not aware of, but.
Yeah, let me double check what that was intended to mean. Thanks.
The only thing I can think of is we did the safety audit, maybe some of the there were intersection improvements with the sidewalks. Anyway, I'd be interested to know what that is. Thank you.
Alyssa?
Thank you. That was fabulous to have an update, even if some of it was not so great news. I also had a question about the sidewalks. My question was, if High Street is out to bid and Willow and Parker were listed separately, does that mean that town staff are going to be working on that as they did with Taylor? Or is that going to be contracted? Just curious.
So the DPW team, I think, uses a combined effort for things that make sense for them to work on and things that make sense to contract. I don't know exactly the plan, but I can get back to you on that. And I do think Corey, it would be good to have Corey come back, because he's got other things going on that you'd want to know about too, in terms of the work he's doing on traffic safety that we didn't mention here. So we could have a more comprehensive update on Public Works alone.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good. And I was also curious if town staff were going to be doing the stone wall at Gardner, because they have done a fabulous job with the stone wall on Taylor. I don't quite understand why it's so wide, but I'm assuming, it doesn't look like from the plans that Gardner Field is going to be that wide, but since they have that know-how now, maybe we can use them to do that instead of
Yeah,
contracting it out.
That is the plan that is part of how we're able to do it. If we can do it with our resources, we wouldn't have the funding to do it otherwise.
Right,
So
okay.
that is the plan.
And then I had one more question, because the sewer extension work is going to be through 2025, as is Kelly's Corner. So I'm wondering, when does the Route 227 work begin? Is it all going to be done at the end of 2025, or are we going into 2026?
The Route 2 and 27 work, meaning the ramps. So that is very early. It's not at 25% yet. So I think the state needs to take that to 25%, have a design public hearing with all the public input, and then I don't know how quickly it would happen, but I'd be very surprised if they started it before this project ended.
So basically, we're going to be in a construction zone in that general area for a number of years.
Any more questions? Sure. Jim?
I couldn't quite tell from the diagram. Where is the new fuel depot going to be?
So if you're, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom. If you're coming into the driveway to the Public Works facility now, if you could picture that, it'll be to the left.
Okay.
And they've already started some, yeah, it'll be to the left.
Jim?
Maybe this is a question for Dean or John. Is there, now that you have a designer for the DPW building and an owner's project manager, is there an agreed on sort of cost structure that you're trying to hit? I mean, I know one reason we took a step back from the project was because it was too much. So do we know, do we have are you working with a general idea of how much is enough, or?
Dean?
So at this point, there was that very detailed feasibility study that was done a couple of years ago. And some of the internal work that's being done between Weston Sampson, PMA, and town staff is to scrub through the feasibility study, see if there's anything that is excessive, and sort of confirm a lot of the assumptions that were made at that point. That said, the preliminary cost estimate we had back then, now that's 2.5, almost 3 years old. So all of those prices have gone up. I think at this point, it's more important to make sure that we get the right design rather than come up with an arbitrary figure of this is how much we want to spend. I'll point out that in 1968, when they designed the existing building, at the last minute, the selectmen at that time lost their nerve and cut back the size of the building by 1/3. And the building committee at that time warned them that the building would be inadequate before the bond was paid off. Well, the bond was paid off, I believe, probably in sometime prior to 1980. We've been living with it since then. So, that's the problem with coming up with a number first and design later. So, yeah, it's going to be an expensive building. There is no question of that. In the feasibility study and in some of the other materials Weston Sampson put together, they looked at similar sized buildings done recently in similar sized towns. And yeah, it's not as much as an elementary school, but more than the North Acton Fire Station. So it's a range somewhere between 14 million and 120 million. Hopefully closer to 14, but more like 40, I think is, you start thinking about it.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you for that update. Those were helpful. So 13, discuss potential policy regarding town council review of citizen petition articles.
Did we skip number
Oh,
12?
did we skip something? Oh, did I do that intentionally? No. I'm sorry. Consider next steps for potential leaf blower bylaw. David.
So I added to but six months ago or so, we had a couple rounds of discussion at the board, and we made changes to the draft at that time, and we were coming back with another draft for us to optimize further. That draft is in the packet. So I would propose, that in order to get the wide variety of opinions here that are in town, that we continue with the process that we had started on last fall. And that is make final tweaks to up to the draft, maybe the next meeting, and then having, the chair willing, having a hearing here where we can, get input from everybody and tweak it still further. So I think the citizens petition did not take into account feedback that we had already heard from various town committees and the select board. And so I would like to have a more inclusive project where we incorporate opinions from a lot of points of view.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The kind of people we might want to hear from, either in written statements or verbal testimony at a public hearing, would include, there were at least 4 amendments that were going to be offered on the floor. So the authors of those amendments, which included members of, town boards and committees. I'd love to hear from town staff, either the departments that would be impacted by implementing the bylaw, or the staff that might be responsible for, enforcing it. So both sides, have interesting staff implications that I'd like to hear from staff about. And I'd love to hear from a person or two from, another town that's already passed the bylaw and is living with it, in case there's, lessons to be learned. And I'd be happy to help with, locating one or more of those types of people, if that's helpful.
Hey, Alyssa, as soon as we're, yeah.
So this draft is dated February 18th. So is this the original draft that you brought to the board, David? And second, okay.
Second
Well,
draft
I
I
mean,
brought
the
to the board.
most recent draft.
It's-
You haven't incorporated any changes. But you did incorporate feedback from council and Green Advisory Board, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and I think 2 of the amendments that would have been offered at town meeting are already in this.
Got it.
In that draft.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. I applaud Jim with saying we should include town staff with this. I think, that some of our groundskeepers might have some really practical ideas that we should understand. First, how a change like this might impact our own operations, and also might illuminate some of the problems that contractors might have if this was to be passed. But I think coming out of this, hopefully, we'll have a law that will get voted up or down, and we won't get into a situation with, potentially 2 competing laws on town meeting floor, because what happens when you do that. It just pushes it off another year and another year. I did notice with the draft you sent there, I think in addition to the other edits, there's probably got to be some timing edits that have to be incorporated as well. just because it didn't happen in May. But, I think that's a good way to proceed with it, and, try to get this nailed down this fall so that we don't have to worry about it at the last minute like we did last year.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We don't have a fall town meeting yet, but there are reasons why we might have a fall town meeting. So preparing this on the early side does seem wise to me too, so that we would be ready in case we wanted to put that on that fall meeting warrant.
David?
Does the board want me to continue with this, or does someone else want to pick it up and shepherd it? I mean, I'm happy to take it forward. We kind of got preempted by the citizens petition. I can arrange for the things that you guys have mentioned today. Or if someone else prefers, the board prefers someone else to do it, that's okay too.
Is there anyone else that would like to take it on, or are we good with David continuing? Jim? Are you?
I'm fine with David doing this. I'm also happy to help if it's, I think that David and I had interesting disagreements, both on the politics and some of the technical aspects of it. So it could be useful to have the two of us, sort of talk those through offline and then bring back something that meets the board. But we could also do that in public if it may be simpler to have one person do the drafting.
And what do you think timing for a public hearing?
So maybe I can talk with you about the scheduling of that offline, maybe not in the summer, maybe one of the September meetings, because I think maybe more people would be around. I would be inclined maybe not to update this draft until after the input, but depending on what you guys want. I think this is maybe a reasonable starting point. Of course, as Dean says, that we can tell people that the dates would have to change. I think rather than us editing it again, we should wait for the public input.
That sounds great. Any more questions? Alyssa, sorry.
So
This gentleman is.
obviously there will be a public hearing. I'm very much in favor of that, but I don't see why the dates need to change because it's 2027. That's almost 3 years out. So that's the first date, January 2027, and then the next one is for residents is 2028.
Dean?
Yeah, one of the dates in there that I was particularly concerned about was regarding town purchasing of equipment, which, that would, if this passes at town meeting next year, the cutoff point for town to purchase that equipment would have been 6 months prior to town meeting. And we can argue about the rest of the implementation.
Yes. Sir, if you want to come to the microphone and just state your name and your address.
My name is Eric Hudson. I live at 160 Nagog Hill Road. I'm also on the Green Advisory Board. Thank you very much. I'm glad this is in discussion tonight. Appreciate it happening. I think the biggest thing I, myself, and the Green Advisory Board would like to be a part of is to help move this forward. I'm not going to say as quickly as possible, but don't want to have it go to the next town meeting and then have something happen where it can't be either passed or not passed. So however we can help, we'd like to. One of the things I'd like to encourage, as well as, participants in the discussion are, possibly someone from the Board of Health there as well, because we know that's one of the biggest concerns about gas-powered leaf blowers. As well, maybe someone who's concerned about noise in the town could come as well. We talked about other town participants. I think it'd be great to have a landscaper who has made the transition come. We know that that's one of the biggest hurdles is the expense the upfront expense for landscapers, but we also know that 2 or 3 years down the road, they actually have a financial benefit from making these investments. So if possible, someone from another town who has made the transition and is involved in the landscaping industry who could attest, that would be great. So again, is any way that I can help or the Green Advisory Board can help, we're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. When comparing us to other towns, it gets a little complicated because most other towns that have done this have had a noise bylaw, and they added this to the noise bylaw. And so it's not the same as this. I mean, it'd be interesting to know, but I just want to clarify that it's not apples to apples.
So moving on. Policy regarding town council review of citizen petition articles. David, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I brought this up to the chair for discussion to see if there was interest on the part of the board. So previously, boards had the select board had a convention that the town council would review citizens petitions after they were certified by the clerk in order to explain to the town what the effect of the citizens petition would be. Whether the effect was enforceable, whether the effect was a resolution or whatever. In addition, the convention was that town council would not normally assist in the writing of the petition unless the board voted to do that. I think it's important that we make that a policy so that it's what we do rather than just a convention. So for several reasons, one is cost containment, right? Legal work is expensive and shouldn't be spent without the board's approval, right? I don't think it should be as a matter of course that council help people write their petitions. Second is fairness to all petitioners, so that we're not helping some petitioners and not helping others, are helping some and not helping others. And also, finally, the town council is really the attorney of this board and the town manager. And assisting a resident with a petition is odd if this board opposes the petition, right? Which is why I'm in favor of doing that only if the board votes to have town council assist them. So anyway, I think this is important, which is why I brought it up, and happy to hear from other members of the board.
Dean?
Yeah, I'd like to supplement David's comments on this. And I firmly agree that, the convention we've had was a wise one, and we should incorporate it, embrace it formally. So, some of the other issues could be that a petitioner might decide that they want to file a petition that is in total opposition to the stated goals of the select board. We could certainly have a situation, I think there's a potential one out there now, where there's a citizen's petition that might seek to overturn decisions that were made at town meeting. And finally, the situation we've had in the past, I think in a recent town meeting, I think we had something like 10 citizens petitions. And just to open up the coffers at Anderson and Krieger and just say, well, okay, anybody who's kind of mulling over the idea about filing out a citizen petition, go talk to our attorneys at, umpty-ump hundreds of dollars an hour. is just not being a reasonable financial decision. I think if folks want the assistance of town council, they should come before us, explain the situation on a case-by-case basis, and if we as a board think that it's a reasonable item to investigate, we could put it on town meeting floor ourselves and go through the normal legal vetting process. So I'm 100% on David's side on this one.
Jim?
I just wanted to apologize for misunderstanding the board's general policy in this area, since I was the person who, sent Paul Campus to town council via town manager to look over the leaf blower bylaw, which I think is what triggered David's concern that this was going wrong. So I get now that was not appropriate. So given that, I think this general policy makes sense. I had a couple questions about the edges of it that maybe David had ideas about. The first one was, I assume it's fine for individual board members to give informal advice to people about because that's not spending town council money. The case in the middle that I wasn't sure how to handle was, so somebody is thinking about writing a petition and they like call you up, John, or they go into the clerk's office and say, oh, what do I do here? I want some help in how to figure out this out. We might want to talk through what our advice is about in those situations. If we need to make advice, that might just be beyond what the board needs to do. Clerks and managers can, do what they want. The other thing I heard you say, David, I just want to make sure I heard it right, is that if the board has a public discussion and decides that that's appropriate, then that we could go ahead with that. Okay, which I think makes sense. I wish I had done that.
Alyssa?
So I think it's a good idea to memorialize this in a policy, but I wonder if instead of simply a policy on the use of town council along the lines of what Jim just brought up, if we can create a guide to citizens petition with that information. When I brought a citizen petition a couple of years ago, I searched on the town website for instructions and didn't find anything other than the petition. So luckily, I was able to find a guide on another town's website. I can't remember the town right now, but that led me to make an appointment with the town manager and talk with him about my petition. And I got some other good ideas about going and getting endorsements from boards and committees who would have an interest in it. So I think that having that information added to the convention that we hold on use of town council and when it's appropriate and when it's not would be helpful to residents in town. Because it saves so much time. If people know how to word them, how to go about getting folks educated, getting support, making it better before they collect signatures. There's just so many headaches for us, for staff, and for the people bringing the petitions and for town meeting when there isn't that really good information and guidance. We can't make people follow, but at least we can provide it in hopes that it will be.
David?
I'm really on board with that, but I would like them to be two separate documents. I think the policy is for the five of us, really, and having a guide to, I'm sure people ask, ask Jim mentioned it, that ask us how to do that. I give people advice on how to do petitions. It's really hard to do a petition that's a bylaw without an attorney. And, you know, as Dean mentioned, the ban the bag folks have on multiple occasions come to the board and asked us to take it. And we have taken it and brought it forward. And that's kind of what happened with the leaf blower thing, except that then it was taken back. So that one way for do a bylaw is to make a presentation, convince us and have us bring it to town meeting. Another way is to find, an example in another Massachusetts town, because then you're pretty sure that it passes state law, but even then it can conflict with our charter or other things. So it gets complicated. But I don't know how people want to proceed. I would be happy to draft the policy and a guide. The guide will take longer. The policy, I think, is one pager. A guide is not a one pager. But I'm happy to start on it. I don't know how we would want to do that exactly. Again, I'm happy to draft it, but there's some maintenance in that, on an ongoing basis, or incorporating new ideas, or, after you go through one town meeting cycle saying, oh, that wasn't the best way, we should change that. So anyway, whatever the board wants.
Jim?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to do this in two phases, to have a simple policy that can be done pretty quickly. The guide, what occurs to me about that is that the town moderator referred to being most of the way through writing a guide about citizen petitions. Now, presumably that was from a certain point of view, how it works well with the moderator. So, we have additional information to add, but it might be, before we do any work on drafting that second part, I would recommend checking in with Joanne and seeing what she's got ready so far. And I welcome your offer to draft it.
Thanks for that offer, David, for the policy. Yeah. Yeah. And I see that we have a call-in resident.
You should be able to speak. Hi, thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. As a person who's done a lot of petitions, it's my understanding that the past process was limited. The legal review of petition language before gathering signatures was limited only to the legality and limiting town's risk, should it pass. So the suggestions that I've personally gotten from town council were like, well, can you put a comma here? Because then it would be more clear in case it passes. That all of this use of town council, it wasn't me, hasn't been me. I've done almost all non-binding, but those binding petitions that I have done, my use of town resources, use of town attorney resources has been very limited to what traditionally has been only to limit the town's risk, should it pass. So please consider that in your policy or proposed or draft policy that you're about to draft. That the cost containment is cheap. It's cheaper. What I was explained, 20 years ago, was that it was cheaper to get the legal review first before signatures were gotten than to let somebody go off and do whatever without any review and get something and then it passes and then there's complications relative to the language. So I urge you to allow that kind of review before signatures are gathered without any kind of select board need for a select board approval, which is counter to the point of a citizen's petition, because if the select board were in favor of doing something, you wouldn't need to do a petition. So in other words, limit it so that the town attorney is not giving strategic advice and is not helping craft the language, but is only suggesting edits to make it legally or binding. So not to assist them with their strategic efforts, but to limit town's liability. So, and thank you very much for that, the opportunity to comment. Thank you.
So are we leaving here with David drafting a policy? Yes, thumbs up. Moving on to consider adding a standing meeting agenda item called meeting evaluation. I put this back on because, there were pleas to put it back on for a discussion. What you don't see here is the votes recorded document, which I think it's a helpful tool that I think I'm going to continue doing. But let's chat about the meeting evaluation. Jim.
Happy to get this started because I brought it forward while I was chair. So I think it's useful for a number of things. One is that if there are difficult or challenging parts of a meeting where people might not have felt heard or might have felt that in the heat of the moment they said something that wasn't appropriate, it's kind of a quick chance to clear out the connection between us as board members. So I think that's valuable rather than having, things linger. No, there's plenty of meetings where that doesn't happen. So I think there's plenty of times where an eval is going to be pretty, brief. It doesn't have much to it. But I think it's good to have it in there as a habit. So when it's needed, it's helpful. I think it's also good for sort of right at the end of the meeting to say out loud what follow-up actions should happen, because sometimes we sort of say those in the midst of a meeting without really making sure they're noted, so it helps with that. And I think it's also good if we're, to learn from what worked well and what didn't work well, just to have a quick conversation about that so we can learn for next time. My experience doing that was that I never felt, animosity or meanness in the comments. I didn't feel put down as chair. I did feel like people had good suggestions about things to do that I liked learning from. And I guess I would suggest that, Fran, if you happen to be concerned about getting, negative or uncomfortable comments, I can say that anytime people spoke at meetings, it seemed like they were very careful to phrase things in terms of, constructive criticism, not, personal attacks. It's also a habit that I have with other organizations that I'm a part of, and it's become a regular part of the culture that seems to be helpful.
Dean?
So some of the issues I have with the meeting evaluation, going through some of your points, I think that going and if we have a lengthy meeting, 3-4 hours, and an item has been discussed and a decision was made, either voted or, sort of a consensus sort of thing, at 8 o'clock at night. And members of the public are watching this and they think, okay, it's done. And then suddenly to effectively reopen some of those items at 11 o'clock at night, I think that disenfranchises the folks that are watching us. So I think there's a real issue there. I think there certainly can be a temptation among some people, myself included, that, you realize that you might have said something badly, so you want to, make up for it. But, again, what you said is on the record, and it stays on the record. And, trying to rephrase things later on to make nice, I don't think is a proper thing to do at 11 or 11:30 at night when most of the public aren't watching anymore. I think as far as keeping track of the decisions were made and the actions that should be taken next, that's why we have a clerk and we have an executive secretary that take very detailed minutes. And I would hope that if during the course of discussion, if I think I've been charged with doing something, having a follow-up, I make a note of it, just as David just did. As far as, he's been tasked with coming up with a statement about access to town council. I think that's something that you should be able to do, and keep track of those things. And finally, as far as issues with, the dynamic between all of us, if I have an issue with one of my colleagues with the way you carried out, phrased something or ran a meeting, frankly, I don't think that 11 o'clock at night is the time to talk about it in a public session. I think if I've got a problem with the way you conducted yourself, that's something that should be done one-on-one. I just, praise in public, criticize in private. And I think every one of my colleagues here, I've drunk a number of cups of coffee with all of you over the last number of years. And, there are lots of times when we don't agree with one another, but I think, we should be collegial enough to be able to, talk to somebody in a private setting about how they might have handled something. So for all of those reasons, I think that the bringing this meeting evaluation back, I think it's fraught with possible issues, and I would not be in favor of it.
Alyssa.
Thank you. So I think that the points that Dean just made about addressing in private, one-on-one, over a cup of coffee, that's a really good point. I've done that before. Also, trying to go back and address something that happened or was said a few hours earlier, not a good idea. I've done that myself and regretted it. So I think that having a meeting evaluation to focus on the last couple of things that you mentioned, Jim, instead of the first about clearing the air, but follow up, because sometimes it's not so clear, and also pointing out something that was instrumental in making the meeting run more smoothly, more orderly, more effective. So one example that I remember was, David, in one meeting evaluation, you said, hey, Jim, when you said to people, anybody who wants to speak against this, because it was obvious that we were going to vote unanimously to approve it, come on up to the mic, and everybody sat back down again. So that made our meeting more efficient, and we ended earlier than we would have had we allowed the public to comment on something that we were just going to approve anyway. And I think, Dean, a couple of times I remember you asking the town manager to follow up on something that a resident had mentioned during resident concern, and that's not something that we typically respond to in the moment. And I don't know if it's problematic to do it later, and it still violates OML, but, when Dave Lunger brought the registrar issue to us, or when Scott Smyers brought the clicker voting, I voted 3 times, did they all count? So directing staff to follow up on that. Maybe they were going to do it anyway, but I like the fact that it's said out loud. One thing that happened at our very last meeting was when I had asked for information about town staff time that had been spent on the McManus Manor project. John said that he hadn't had time to do that, but it would be interesting to do if the board directed. And then that was the end. And had there been a meeting evaluation, I could have said, did the board agree that that was the direction? Because I was the only one who said it. So it wasn't clear that that was the direction that the entire board wanted. So I think that Jim, you said having the meeting evaluation there for when it's necessary is good. And there were many occasions when nobody had anything to report during the meeting evaluation. But I wholeheartedly agree that we need to be really careful in how it's used and not to clear the air or try and explain something that was said hours earlier. I think those were all good points that you made. And I just didn't want to get rid of it without having a discussion. I don't feel that strongly about it, but I do think that it's a very valuable tool when it's used judiciously.
Of course.
So, I have to say that I agree with everything that's been said so far. I mean, I kind of agree with what everybody's said. But first of all, I'll say it's the style of the chair. If the chair wants this or wants to call it something else, I mean, I'm not sure that I would call it meeting evaluation. When I was chair, I'm not sure I did this consistently, but before accepting a motion to adjourn, I would ask people if they had anything else, members, if they had anything else. I don't know what we'd call it, but I do think it comes up, not only, I completely agree with, maybe this isn't the forum to clear the air, but not only is there the kind of follow-ups that Alyssa mentioned, I think during the McGovern site plan special permit, it was brought up that we might want to control car dealerships. And at the end of that meeting, I'm pretty sure that I asked whether we should bring that up separately, right? And we ended up doing that. And so that things can branch sometimes, and we just need to record the branch. Of course, I could have just done that with the chair, right? I could have just gone back to Jim and said, this was brought up at the meeting, do you want to add it to a future agenda, right? So it's not necessary to do it unless the biggest benefit to me, and I don't know what I'd call it. I don't think meeting evaluation is the right thing. It's a place to do final discussion on things in a context that doesn't violate OML, where it might involve multiple of us to be involved. Like, do we feel that we need to follow up on changing the zoning for car dealerships? If everybody goes, no, then we're done, right? If some of us say, yeah, well, that might be worth following up on, then the chair knows to add that to a future agenda. Whereas the chair can't go around and ask, what do you think about car dealerships? What do you think? I think there's some value in a final discussion. I'm not sure I would call it. The two most important things to me were the follow-ups and the logistics of the meeting. The thing with the comments, and there were a couple other cases where, in the course of there's something that maybe we could have done that would have made the meeting more efficient.
So my reason for removing it was just because I thought it just extended the meeting a little bit longer, and I wanted things to run more efficiently. What I'm hearing is maybe I should do a recap after each agenda item instead of a meeting evaluation. Because we're still on the topic and we're not rehashing, because I just don't think we have to talk about the meeting after the meeting. I'm sorry. That's just my feeling. Am I making sense? So I need to maybe rework my chair abilities. And I feel like we're evaluating this meeting right now. Jim.
I just wanted to agree with the statement that I think this is entirely depends on the, chair style and chair goals. So I understand why I did it, and I think it might not make sense for other people. I agree that it would be very powerful. It's not something I did, but I think it would be very powerful to have that moment of recap at the end of each agenda item. It puts it at the right time, like, as because I think Dean's has this legitimate concern about, suddenly talking about something 3 hours later. It's when things are fresh in people's mind. If there is something about the process or the content or the follow-up, this is time to take a breath, make sure we've got it said before moving on to the next item. I think that serves, 80% of the purpose of a meeting eval by just putting it right there as a recap. And I don't think I availed myself as much as I could have of the one-on-one conversations. So I'll just put that in my toolbook too. It's like, I'll take a note about, how, something I thought, and then I'll, contact one of you and say, gee, when you did that thing, maybe it helped or it didn't help, or, I'll let people know if I think it's big enough to talk about.
It's fun to pick up the phone once in a while.
Yeah, I hate it, but I'm willing to, yeah.
Alyssa? Oh, I'm not going to continue on with the meeting evaluation, but I will continue on with the votes recorded. I think that's a useful document.
Awesome. I was just going to say, I feel like you do often do a little recap at the end of.
Do I?
You do, because you ask us, are we moving on to
Yeah.
agenda item 9? You don't say moving on to agenda, well, sometimes you do, but
Yeah.
it's definitely not a decision by Fran, we're moving on. You are checking,
Yes.
well, that was only tonight. You check in with us, but having it be called, I was going to suggest meeting review, but I like
Yeah.
recap better. So just after each agenda
Agenda.
item.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's what you
Because we're still
are
hot on the
doing.
topic, and, yeah. Great. So to consent items, approve meeting minutes June 3rd and 17th, 2024.
Hold.
Approve executive session minutes July 2nd, 2024. Approve a one-day alcoholic beverage license application, Deborah Dormitzer, Nara Park Bathhouse Pavilion, August 11th, 2024. Accept donation for $150 from Bonnie Agar Lobel towards the Acton Dog Park.
Move to approve consent items 16 through 18 inclusive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then Dean, you held.
Yes.
Yeah.
So very minor change, issue for the meeting minutes on June 3rd. Item 10. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. Mr. Charter offered to submit comments from board members and felt their submit comments from board members. I don't believe I was the one that offered to submit them, and I know that Jim had actually done that, so Jim should get the credit. That's it.
Do we need to move to make that change?
I would move to amend the minutes to say, Mr. Snyder Grant offered to submit comments from board members.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to approve meeting
Yeah.
minutes from June 3rd and June 17th as edited.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to adjourn.
Oh, there's a question from Lisa.
I withdraw my motion.
Since the representative from Eversource never logged back in, I recommend that the board continue the hearing to August 26, 2024 at 7:20 PM.
Is that so moved?
I'll second, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Is August 26th our only August meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, that's my only question. Yep.
So we are continuing.
We have to call for the vote.
Oh.
You moved, I seconded.
You call.
All in favor, sorry.
Aye.
I was forgetting to call for the vote.
Now I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.